Welcome to the Inside Sales Enablement Podcast. Where has the profession been? Where is it now? And where is it heading? What does it mean to you, your company, other functions, the market? Find out here. Join the founding father of the sales enablement profession, Scott Santucci, and trailblazer Brian Lambert as they take you behind the scenes of the birth of an industry. The Inside Sales Enablement Podcast starts now.
I'm Scott Santucci.
I'm Brian Lambert, and we are the Sales Enablement Insiders. Our podcast is for sales enablement leaders looking to elevate their function, expand their sphere of influence, and increase the span of control within their companies.
Together, Brian and I have worked on over 100 different kinds of sales enablement initiatives, ranging from analysts, consultants, or even practitioners. We've learned the hard way what works, and most importantly, what doesn't.
And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the flavors of sales enablement, not how tasty they are, Scott, but how they're organized and the scope of sales enablement as we're out and about and talking to folks. So why don't you frame this out for us?
So normally we have a framing story, but basically since October, you and I have been talking to lots of sales enablement professionals and sales leaders, and we're developing a kind of two things. One is sort of a clear pocket of where observation about where sales enablement is as a profession, and some of that is frankly very concerning to us. So what we'd like to do is share with you an observation about sort of tensions and provide some texture about where the role is, and then get into the topic of flavors after that so that people have some context of why we're talking about that. So Brian, you've recently been, you're just coming back from a trip where you've visited a lot of enablement professionals. Let's sort of do the composite of all the different interactions that we've had. Describe for us, what are the characteristics of a sales enablement leader today?
Yeah, sure. And like you said, let's look at, the last 3 months. So, the end of the year quarter here, and then the beginning of a new year is really the timeline that we're looking at. And as you can imagine, Scott, the end of year and start of a new year can be pretty busy for sales teams. And that's obviously reflecting in the folks that I'm talking to in sales enablement. I don't know if that's also what you're seeing, but everybody's busy. So we'll use the phrase everybody's busy. And there's really two types of busy that I'm seeing. There's the busy with activity, and then there's the busy being productive. And that's what I want to talk to our listeners about. Those are two different things to me. And Scott, I'd love your take on this. But the idea of being actively busy is stuff like, hey, I'm on a plane, I'm responding to requests, I'm running events, people are walking by and I'm talking to them. I've got a bunch of emails I need to respond to. I'm moving, from meeting to meeting to meeting. I'm attending those, and I'm gathering inputs, and I'm present at these, but I'm not necessarily running the meetings. And I'm thinking about who I need to talk to next, who's coming at me with a request, and it's very busy in that stance. And definitely seeing that on one continuum. On the other continuum, had some conversations with folks who are also busy. Their calendars are pretty full, but they're setting aside time to talk about, here's what I'm seeing for the 2020 strategy. Here's the focus of the sales team as the sales leadership is meeting. This is what I'm hearing in the meetings across the different sales segments that I support, the different sales channels. And you know what? I'm obsessed about, and I'm worried about the talk track of my function and how valuable it is, and what it's perceived like by these executives. And I'm not so much, Brian, concerned about if I'm liked. I'm concerned about am I considered valuable to the go-to-market strategy? And I need more numbers. I need more analytics. I need to be able to tell this story better, and that's what's keeping me busy. And finding the right talent is secondary, but it's more about quality of impact, not quantity. So those are the two continuums. Everybody's busy, but it's like two different types of busy. And I've had both of those conversations, and they couldn't be any more different, to be honest with you. That's what I'm seeing. What about you?
Yeah, so the way that I would characterize it is twofold. I think that there is, on the one hand, there's the I have gotten into the role of sales enablement as the head of broken things. Right, I'm a powerful person. I have made my name of fixing broken things. The thing that I look for are things that are broken. I go to try to fix them. There's so many broken things. I have to go fix it. And you sort of get in that mindset of, my team really can't do it. No one else really can do it. I have to just do it. And there's just never enough cycles. There's never enough time in the day. And really, the way that I would characterize it is that's being busy because that's what you think your value proposition is, the head of broken things. Whereas the flip side is in a role like sales enablement, which is, frankly, fuzzily defined, in even well-chartered groups, of which we see maybe less than 25%, Brian, I would consider a well-chartered function. Even those don't nearly have enough time to do all the internal selling required, just because the amount of change that's happening in the selling environment and the multitude of different, very strong perspectives about what's required to improve sales is overwhelming. So there's the other side of busy, which is how do we keep up with all of the demand and all of the expectations. That would be more how I would characterize it. Sort of the bucket number one. I'm busy. Most of that's a self-fulfilling prophecy because I believe that my value is because I'm the head of. I fix things. I need to be valued because that's why people value me. That's why we have this department. So you're always going to be busy because that's what you're looking for. You're looking for symptoms to treat and put them out, put those fires out quickly. Whereas there's the other form of busy, which is maybe you've accomplished something like really standardized on the the price quote system, or maybe you've simplified Salesforce or something like that. There's a lot of maintenance that goes with fixing that, but then what do you do next? So yeah. That would be how I could characterize it. Does that map to what you're seeing?
Yeah. And then to make this tangible for folks, there's if in the busy of attending the meetings versus the busy of heading the meetings and calling the meetings and organizing the cross-functional team to fix something. I think that's a good litmus test on how many meetings are you really running, what are you really controlling, and that type of busy is completely different. Just to bring that home at an individual level. And then Scott, as we lead into our topic for today, we've talked about this, and we're seeing these patterns develop of where sales enablement teams and are spending their time and what types of initiatives they're running. For example, some might be focused on messaging, or where I spend a lot of time on the people and performance and training side of sales enablement. And you've developed over time a lot of understanding of this type of scope. And we've been talking about these areas, which we were calling flavors of sales enablement. I think it'd be great to walk through that. Can you share the framework?
Sure. So what it is, it's a observational framework backed by a lot of practical experience. And what it really comes down to is if you are, we delineated the two types, right? Type number one is, hey, I am valuable because I get stuff done. And that's the premise of my department. What I'm about to talk to you, you're probably going to reject everything. You're going to say, this sounds too theoretical. What's my action? And, frankly, what am I going to have to ask you to do is think about, is fixing symptoms really valuable, or is elevating your function and actually proactively addressing the source of the symptoms, is that's what's valuable. Yeah. That's really the second bucket, right?
Yeah. And I just want to quickly, that's a great point. There's there's how everybody shows up to you as a sales enablement leader. Let's park that and what people are asking for and what they're bombarding you with and what all the inputs are. Let's just talk about you and your role and what is your value. What do you think you should be or what do you need to be as a functional leader? And I like that dichotomy, Scott, of are you fixing the broken things or are you doing something different? And that's regardless of how people are showing up to you right now in this conversation.
Yeah, and I think that the best way to park that, right, to create the space of it. I love this quote from Henry Ford. If I would ask customers what they want, they'd want a faster horse. If you have so much inbound demand about what you should be doing, if you just take that all on, you're just making faster horses instead of building cars, right? So let's make that pivot and let's recognize that the full scope of all of the things that sales enablement could touch is so galactically huge. We could look at this and say, sales is about driving revenue or bookings, and enablement is about doing anything to make that easier. So with that scope, with that huge, gigantic scope, we're basically talking about a function that is the connective tissue of all of the different silos inside the company. Obviously, that scope is too gigantic for any one group to really tackle, but you have to be able to move outside of, hey, our sales kickoff stinks. We need to have somebody just have better sales kickoffs. Let's tap you on the shoulder to go fix it. So there's a balance between the two. So what we've identified is there's 4 big chunks that you can fix that really go around fixing friction that exists among the sales organization and different functional groups. And that's really where a lot of these problems exist in the first place, because customers don't really care about your organizational politics and who reports to who. They care about getting the answers. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through these 4. We're going to do it one at a time. All right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like it.
Okay. So the first function, the first chunk of that big giant area is the chunk around talent. Now, talent you can look at in a lot of different ways, but let's just first talk about all of the different activities or things that are involved in talent. Talent starts with hiring. So the whole process of figuring out what kind of sales rep do we need in the first place, to how do we go and recruit them or pay for them, all of that stuff, all the way through to evaluating and improving reps. There's a whole lot that goes into talent. And then when you think about all the stuff that goes into talent, let's talk about all the functions involved. Finance is involved because they have to approve the headcount in the first place. Different groups within HR are involved from the, every HR group is organized differently, but you have some basic functions like leadership development. You're going to have sort of performance, HR performance people. You're going to have recruiters, and your L&D department might work in your human resources group. Each one of those departments may or may not interact with each other. Then when you go to the sales organization, who's the primary interface point? Who's the primary interface point from the on-taking, how are we going to make requests of new hires? Is that an individual sales manager? Does that get funneled through sales operations? What role does sales enablement play in terms of, hey, we've got this amount of inbound. Could you have foresight into onboarding, and when does onboarding begin and end? There's a whole slew of things under talent. So the way that we like to look at talent is it's the process of recruiting, retaining, and developing the right people. That's sort of the scope of it. There are many different departments involved. The benefit to salespeople are better and more skilled reps and improvement. And we look at that as a business process from hire to retire. So that's really the first bucket.
Yeah, I like that. And You talked about functions, and some of the titles that I've seen in there are indeed, L&D. I've seen sales enablement have that title of sales enablement, but the scope is around the talent piece. And in the talent piece, they're really focused on, for example, just the onboarding slice. And so there's an opportunity there to expand if you are in the talent piece or flavor to think about, how do you branch into recruiting and then also the ongoing development area to really improve the rep experience from hire through retire.
Yeah, so I think what we can do is we can zoom in and have a show on each one of the flavors to provide more context. But really, what we want to highlight would be the scope of what you're looking for, and who are the departments or the stakeholders whom you need to work with. What is the business process that this would entail so that you can manufacture something and produce sustainable results? And then what is the measurable impact on the sales organization?
Great. Let's go to the next flavor.
Okay, so the next flavor is really about the friction that exists between marketing and sales. And I personally do not like marketing and sales alignment. That sounds like we're going to get a bunch of guitars together, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya. It is beyond alignment. It must be integrated. And so what we're looking at is let's think about it this way. If we get our talent right, let's say that we develop the best course ever. We've got the most skilled reps in the entire industry. When they show up, they still have to talk about something, right? That message of what they talk about doesn't come from training. It comes from the synthesis of information from individual product marketers. You might have solution experts. You might have vertical overlays. Think about all of the people in different departments that have a variety of subject matter expertise and strong opinions about how to take your company's messaging and positioning and making it relevant to the individual human beings that salespeople engage with. So we call this bucket or flavor message. And in message, it's about translating all of the stuff about your company into conversational specific things. And the business process that we look at it is concept to contact. And what that means really is when we go and talk to a lot of customers, one of the things that or people like you, I really like to ask, so what do we sell? Who do we sell to? And why do they buy? And to me, those are the elements. Everybody should know those answers, but very few companies can give me consistent answers. And where they stumble the most is the who. They give me personas, but personas aren't good enough. A salesperson must find somebody with an altitude level and a leadership position to drive a new thing forward. They have to have the right access to budgets or the ability to assemble budgets. And they have to have the right, sort of confidence level to be able to do this, because let's face it, we're introducing something new into these clients. And there's a big change management component that is risky to most people. So really what we're talking about here is how do you orchestrate all that messaging and move it away from being product focused and to make it more success or outcome focused. And that's a major, major transformation.
Absolutely. And that you get, when you do that, the fuel for customer conversations. And, there are multiple roles in the organization that benefit from that. Not, there's sales and there's also customer service and solution architects, et cetera. So there's a lot of stakeholders involved in that. And if you are in the talent space as a listener and you're like, well, that's outside my scope, that's fine. The question I would also then ask or just think about is, are we still talking about sales enablement? And to Scott and I, absolutely. This is our second flavor of 4. All of these are sales enablement to us. And if you're a part of the Insider Nation, we want you to think that way too. You're going to be in one of these flavors. And we'll talk about the impact of understanding these 4 here at the end. But this is still sales enablement to us, this message concept to contact piece.
Yeah,
Right.
that's true. And I like where you're coming at it from, because if you think about the different stakeholders, a sales enablement function can emerge and report really anywhere, right? So if we talk about the talent function, that probably, it makes sense that that would rise out of the genesis of, maybe an old sales training group, right? And just sort of expanding out from there and expanding the scope. On the message part, realistically, this could come out of product marketing, and say, hey, look, we need to do some fundamental change of how we message and be a lot more customer oriented or customer centric. And when you start thinking about all these new roles that exist inside marketing department, you've got account-based marketing, you've got customer experience reps who are trying to, or professionals who are trying to build buyer journey maps and all their things like that. You've got a whole slew of product marketers. You have solution marketers. You might have vertical marketers. Demand generation and brand marketing might involve there. The number of people just in marketing alone that are all singing off of different hymn sheets is massive. Let alone, how do we identify the messaging that's required for each different sales channel?
And that's definitely still sales enablement to us, back to that point. And then also, you know what, Scott, we have just killed, I think, two birds with one stone. We can now, I believe, where we're heading here, when people ask us where sales enablement should report, we're going to go tell them to listen to this episode.
Yeah. Right. There we go. It's fantastic for killing two birds with one stone.
Yeah, there we go. All right, let's go to the third bucket.
Okay, so the third bucket is a bucket that we like to call engagement. Now, I like one-word definitions of things, right? But really what engagement is about is there's a incredible amount of pressure on sales leaders of driving efficiencies in the pipeline. And today, the overwhelming majority of focus on that pipeline is either at the top of the funnel, and a lot of friction and debate about, is it a marketing qualified lead? Is it a sales qualified lead? Is it a lead? Blah, 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 blah. A lot of back and forth there. And there's a lot of friction between demand generation groups within marketing and the sales organization. Just tremendous amount of friction there. And then you get on the other end of the spectrum, which is the closing, right? The end of the sales cycle, which is, hey, our reps aren't negotiating well enough. We got to do more negotiating training. We've got to, get managers more involved in sort of the approval process. Those are just 2 points of it. There's a giant amount of space in the middle that is completely overlooked that can drive a lot of performance. Things like, what inspection actually is done? So companies do invest in putting together a pitch deck, but we all know a pitch doesn't work in an executive level sale. It's a conversation. What inspection is being done on those, first meetings? Another problem that happens is, how do you make sure that you have qualified both the right stakeholder and whether or not it's a real opportunity? And then a third major milestone is that whole process of losing to no decision. Really, what's happening is your deals are timing out because you're not equipping your internal sellers or your champions to sell internally on your behalf. So there are three gigantic gaping holes that provide a sieve to your pipeline that you could develop very targeted, integrated programs. The challenge is there are so many cooks in the kitchen with regards to pipeline. You have sales operations people who are microscopically evaluating whether the forms are done, whether you're filling the CRM system out correctly or not. You have finance who's involved, who wants to see higher forecasting accuracies because the forecasts are terrible. You have sales management who's responding to this by doing, in some cases, we've seen weekly forecast reviews. That's insane. just a tremendous amount of focus on just forecast review.
A lot of inspection.
Yes, total inspection. Then you throw in the demand generation people in there who are obsessed with the top of the funnel and want to know how come the leads aren't getting followed up on, whereas the salespeople complain that the leads aren't at the right altitude level in the first place, and nobody's having any conversations about the real problems.
Yeah.
That is the state of affairs. You have finance involved, putting a lot of pressure on. You have sales managers adding to it. You have demand generation, and everybody's angry and everybody's reacting. And what is the result? More inspection of the reps, which creates more friction in the pipeline process.
Yep. And this one of the four, this one to me is really a top priority because it is such a mess. But when I talk to sales enablement leaders, they don't want to touch this one with a 10-foot pole.
No one wants to touch this.
Nobody wants to touch this one. And but when I talk to sales managers, because I spend a lot of time with sales managers, this is the hidden frustration. This to me is why they only review things and just sign off on it and get it over with. Because in the big scheme of things, this engagement bucket is their number one problem.
Right. So when we look at it, and I mentioned we talk about this as a process, the way that we look at this as a process is the contact to contract process. So what are the steps that you go through from, figuring out who we want to target to how do we get access to them to how do we get them to agree to explore an opportunity with us to how do we help them navigate internally to gain the internal buy-in. How do we help them produce put together a business case and then, sign up with us? That's the contact to contract process.
Yeah. And for you researchers at heart, those that like to figure out and do the detective work, this is a great one to start because when you start mapping out the steps in the business process of contact to contract, it's fascinating and it's a jumbled mess.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, so in terms of where sales enablement reports to, if you report into a sales operations group, this is a great place to start. So, the talent one is your genesis might be training, and then you elevate into talent. Messaging, your genesis might be in product or solution marketing, and you elevate into the sales organization. The engagement one, you might focus on you might start out in sales operations and, evolve there.
Great. Let's go then to number 4.
So number 4 is astonishingly to me personally is one of the simplest things to do. And the one that just for whatever reason just gets met with the most resistance. And I call it administration. And what this is about is,
why, by the way,
what's that?
It might be why people don't like it, Scott, that administration word. We're in sales. We're in sales enablement.
I hear you.
Perspective, you might as well just say liver and onions.
Well, liver and onions are healthy for you too, right? But the point is, unfortunately or fortunately, there are rules that we have to comply with. We have rules. They're either regulations or rules set up by our company that we have to comply with. And that compliance process, the whole design of what those policies are typically done in fiefdoms. So, for example, the policies of what counts as what counts as accruable revenue or revenue that could be put in the comp plan or even the comp plan, that gets done by one group of people. The rules associated with revenue recognition get done by a different group of people. The whole product SKU debacle that exists in most companies is done by another group of people. The pricing strategies and the rules associated with pricing and discounts are done by a different group of people. Unfortunately, salespeople have to put all that stuff together. And since none of these policies or administrative activities are mapped out and documented, really what we do is we set up a situation where everybody thinks that the salespeople are a bunch of imbeciles because they can't fill out the daggone forms correctly. But there are
And they create a deal desk to help them.
Right. Well, so the deal desk only does one part of it, right? We're factoring in, look at all of the different variables that go into this. So then on top of that, you design systems, and the people who create the requirements for the technology are getting it from the explicit requirements coming from either compensation, or whether it's the SKUs, or whether it's something else. And what's fascinating is you could actually simplify or take a lot of burden away from sellers just by fixing one of these areas. Like, for example, the SKUs or the price to quote process, right? It's easy. It's relatively easy to do. You don't really need to work with sales a lot. You just need to fix a lot of back-end systems. But nobody wants to tackle it because they think it's too complicated. And that's the asinine thing, because people don't want to tackle it because it's too complicated. They push that complexity onto salespeople and
Right.
complain about how salespeople don't have any time.
And be like, okay, well, they didn't do it, but now you're messing with the livelihood of salespeople and slowing down the sales process and aggravating customers because we didn't want to tackle it internally.
Exactly. And
the case
it's
with all
death
these.
by 1,000 paper cuts. So in some cases, Brian, I did some analysis, and one company that's, the bigger the company you've got, the bigger the administrative burden you're putting on your reps. And one company, we analyzed their key accounts, and the key account group was so burdened by so many different administrative functions that 50% of their time was spent with administrative burden. And when we did a simple analysis of what could be consolidated just by tackling it, 3/4 of that time could be collapsed. Think about that. So think about giving your reps back 50, well, not 50%, but let's say 40% of their day. How much more productive could they be? And that is what you can do by tackling the administrative problems and simplification strategies. So we call this process contract to revenue. There's all these different rules and things like that. Really, it's around the simplification process, and unfortunately involves a lot of groups. It will involve different groups within your finance department. It will include different functions within sales operations. It will include maybe different folks in terms of human resources, in terms of policies that get developed. It may include your legal team. It will definitely include your IT department and folks in terms of technology. And nobody wants to address any of these issues. And frankly, there's some very simple things to eliminate a lot of this burden just by having a different approach. But nobody is responsible for this.
Yeah. And, it's popping into my head. I don't know where I get this stuff from. Those awards that often come out for sales training, the annual, there's a lot of people posting right now about the awards they're receiving. Somebody needs to create the administrative burden award, the best program to lower the administrative burden on reps goes to. we got to make that more appealing to people.
Yeah, the simplifier.
The simplifier award goes to. Everybody's gonna be like, "What the hell is that?" So there's 4 folks. We got talent with hire to retire, messaging, flavor, concept to contact, the engagement flavor, which is contact to contract, and the administration flavor, contract to revenue. And when I look at it, I say it kind of tongue in cheek. These domains are, 1, they're all part of sales enablement to Scott and I. 2, some of these are more appealing than others. But when you put it in the context of what reps need to be successful today, boy, are these important. And then, Scott, I'll toss this over to you. What's the impact of these to leading in the role? Because to me, it's a leadership challenge that people have, not a org chart functional challenge. how do you lead in these domains, and then how would you take on other domains?
Yeah, so I think there's two buckets, right? So let's say let's say my current remit for sales enablement is I own the sales training, I own the sales kickoff, and I'm responsible for building playbooks or job aids, right? Let's say that that's my current remit. So the first thing is, okay, will any of these things help me do my job better? And the answer is yes. So for example, let's take all of the administrative burden, and if that gets simplified, that creates way more space inside reps so that they can adopt the things that you're doing. When people are spending so much time, 50% of their time, dealing with, I don't know what question to ask or what field to form out, we're turning salespeople into accountants and data entry specialists. That creates no space for them to learn the techniques that you're providing. So your success is directly related to fixing, say, some of the administrative problems. Your success is related to targeting on the engagement. If you can be really honed in and say these skills will help you get more qualified opportunities, that helps you for two reasons. One is you can be more concrete to reps, but also more importantly, you can measure results way easier because it's so much easier to measure the contribution of qualified opportunities and project that into closes rather than just how skilled people are. And the same thing with messaging. You and I all know that every training program that we put together, we get super frustrated with the messaging that goes into it. And why can't marketing just give us X, Y, and Z? Well, if that were fixed, that would make your job easier too. So I think I want to address it first is the reason that you should care about the whole breadth of these things, because even if you want to stay isolated and say, I don't want to tackle these other things, they all contribute to your success. That's point one. Does that make sense? Because I want to break that up before I go into point two.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Okay, now point number two is in terms of leadership. Part of what you have to learn to do is to elevate the message of simplification. Your sales leaders and your CEOs are so reactionary with regards to the pipeline because there isn't any real planning. And I don't mean that in the sense of there isn't planning in terms of the design of the sales force or whatnot. I'm talking about in terms of the execution. It's constant reactive mode. So the only way out of this is somebody has to take that first step forward. So let's stay on talent, for example. One way to elevate that would be to quantify what is the impact of turnover. Even if you have 25% turnover, you could argue that that's healthy or not healthy. But if you actually do a analysis, you're going to realize that if you have 25% turnover, the bulk of where your turnover is happening isn't the reps who aren't cutting it. The bulk of the turnover is you're probably losing your A and B reps. And when you look at the productivity that's walking out the door, it's going to take you 3 or 4 new hires to replace that same degree of performance. And you don't know that. So there are massive costs to turnover, and getting that right is important. Another thing too is let's talk about onboarding and making sure you're clear about what is the handoff between your onboarding program and what is the role of frontline sales management. I think everybody knows that there's a lot of challenges with frontline sales management, but it's just not something that's tackled. And not holding different people accountable for their different functions makes it really difficult to isolate problems moving forward. So therefore, you can't really pinpoint, hey, we did this, we had these new hires, and that batch, that group became more productive 50% quicker because we got these efficiencies down. So what happens is if you get more focused on these things, you're able to provide simpler and more measurable ways to be evaluated, which of course give you more scope, span of control, authority, budget. But also it makes the doing your job a lot easier because you can stay focused on a few of those metrics. So there's 2 points of this. One is the ability for you to perform your job improves exponentially when these other flavors are fixed. Number 2 is by focusing on any of these areas, you can put together more measurable results and be more of a strategic partner to help drive results moving forward.
Love it. All right, so this has been a lengthy topic, but really meaty. And when you look at these areas, very critical, I believe, for our listeners. And I like your comment earlier about perhaps we take each one of these and dive into them, specifically in future episodes. And I like your tips at the end around making sure we think about this holistically and also prioritize is what I'm getting. And if you do the work and you think it through, you actually can develop a roadmap here, no matter where you report into. A lot of impact. And, one of the key items that I'd love our listeners to take away is if you don't tackle some of these flavors or domains, nobody else will, 1, and 2, this complexity will be pushed onto your reps. So that's my takeaway. Scott, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we let our listeners go?
I do. To summarize this, I would really highlight the 80-20 rule. And I think this is a concept that is not discussed among the sales enablement community, not nearly enough. And the 80-20 rule is so powerful and so real when you apply it to sales. It's mind-boggling that we're not talking about it more. And really what these flavors do is give you a way to first, chunk out our low-hanging fruit is what? Is it a talent issue? Is it a message issue? Is it an engagement issue? Is it an administration issue? And go after the low-hanging fruit. And then the other thing too is by having a process lens to it, what it does is allow you to isolate even more specifically one thing. So let's talk about the engagement process. For example, we've seen companies who say, hey, we're just not executing on our strategy. Like, okay, well, are you talking to the right people? How many meetings did you have at, say, the CIO level? Oh, we had 0. Well, there's your problem right there. Let's do a program only focused on getting more meetings with CIOs. And then it becomes very manageable, measurable, focused, and you get the momentum and you get everybody rowing in the right direction, which is a critical success factor for any sales enablement leader.
Great. And folks that are listening and members of the Insider Nation, give us a call or drop us a line on this. We'd love to see what you're seeing, hear about what you're wrestling with, and also, any successes you've had on this. I think part of the reason why we want to do this show is to not only highlight some of the challenges that folks might be running into and ways to think about overcoming those, but also we'd love to hear about the wins that you've had and what's working. And try putting this into practice, this thinking, and see how it works in your organization and let us know. And as always, Scott and I appreciate your constant feedback and overall approach to sales enablement as part of the nation, because it's very collaborative and we like that. So we'll see you at LinkedIn. We'll see you at some of these events that are coming up. And on behalf of Scott, take care and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks for joining us. To become an insider and amplify your journey, make sure you've subscribed to our show. If you have an idea for what Scott and Brian can cover in a future podcast or have a story to share, please email them at engage@insidese.com. You can also connect with them online by going to insidese.com, following them on Twitter, or sending them a LinkedIn request.